that point in the traditional sense of digital, that's an important thing for somebody to know, your designated person to know how to access or where those things are. So that'll be a really helpful tool for that type of thing, in addition to other assets. And then our upcoming topic next week, just as a reminder, is I should say topic, it's our Oshkosh Public Seminar. So our Wills versus Trust Seminar down at Oshkosh at the Culver Family Welcome Center. So if you want to sign up for that, you can do so at estateplanninglive.com. But again, that'll be in person down in Oshkosh. So, and there's 2 sessions, 2 p.m. and then 6 p.m. as well. So, okay, to kind of get started on the cryptocurrency discussion. Crypto is obviously different than a lot of other assets. I mean, that's the appeal of it in a lot of ways. The way it's, less oversight over it, less regulation over it at the moment, and less access, to potentially being hacked and things like that. But those same positives from that side of things can also be negatives, or at least concerns, when it comes to passing those assets on through an estate plan or to the next generation, because you're by definition limiting those access, or the access to those accounts or to those assets. So it's really important then to make sure that somebody that you trust knows how to access those assets, so that when it comes time to pass those assets on according to your wishes, or to sell it, or to access it during an incapacity even, it's really important that you've at least told that person, that chosen trusted individual, how to access those accounts and where to find the right information. So there are a few different ways that you can look at gaining, access to that information. One of which is the more traditional and more, I guess, practical nature of, with that person that you've named, make sure, or named or chosen rather, make sure that you tell them, is it in a cold storage wallet? Where is that cold storage wallet? If it's in a safe, do they know the code to get into that safe? And then with that cold storage wallet, do they know the seed key phrases, right? The phrases that they're going to need to access and unlock those cold storage wallets, so that they can then potentially exchange the cryptocurrency on your behalf if you would want them to be able to do that. So there's a lot of things like that you're not going to have traditional access through a bank, or through getting power of attorney necessarily, because if somebody doesn't know where those things are, it doesn't matter what legal authority they have to access it. If they don't know where it is, nobody does, right? And especially if it's all offline, the biggest risk with that, with an incapacity, of course, is that, well, if the crypto market's changing and you would want to exchange that cryptocurrency for something else, or sell or buy new, if they don't have access to your crypto, then they don't know where it is. They can't exchange it for you. They can't potentially trade it in the way that you would want them to be able to, or purchase or sell, right? In the event of you passing away, the biggest risk is if that nobody knows where that cold storage wallet is, or the offline cryptocurrency is. It's as if it doesn't exist, right? There's no record of it at that point, from a standpoint of like a bank or an institution managing it, where they can see a transaction. It's out there somewhere. They don't know where it went. It's in a cold storage wallet that if somebody doesn't have access to, it's as good as if it doesn't exist. So you want to make sure that somebody knows where that is. I mean, that's definitely one of the most important considerations from a practical side of things, because doesn't matter how safe you've kept it. If you've kept it so safe that nobody knows where it is and nobody can access it for your beneficiaries, or trade it on your behalf in the event of an incapacity where you would want them to be able to do that. And I mean, one of the things that you can look at, though, if you're not keeping things in that cold storage wallet, maybe you're using an exchange potentially, or like, I guess some of the online accounts where you're not really buying the cryptocurrency itself, but buying sort of shares in the cryptocurrency, right? Where you don't actually own the crypto itself. Having a good financial power of attorney during your lifetime is going to be very helpful for that. You want that power of attorney to reference things like, powers over digital assets, and making sure that somebody has access to online accounts if they need it. Do they know the passwords to those accounts is helpful too, but also if they needed to get that legal access to it, would they be able to do so? Those are things that, you can have access to through a power of attorney, and potentially through a guardianship as well. If somebody doesn't have that power of attorney. But you can obviously be much more expansive with those authorities in a power of attorney for finance, as opposed to trying to explain to a court that you need access to like cryptocurrency online accounts and things like that, which I suppose with time they'll be more aware of and, maybe be more up to date on that. But because it's a relatively, under the legal sense, again, relatively new type of concern that people have, I wouldn't want to leave that up to that type of decision through a court. I'd much rather have somebody have access through a power of attorney, for example. But again, if you have it all offline in that cold storage wallet, that power of attorney isn't really going to help somebody have access to it. It might give them the legal authority to do it, but that legal authority is relatively meaningless if nobody knows how to access it or where it is, or how to, even if they know where that cold storage wallet is, if they don't have the right seed phrases to get into it, are they going to be able to do anything with it? Or is it just at that point, essentially a hunk of metal, right? So very important to have those things in place, that designated person. And you don't have to necessarily tell that person right now what those phrase words are, or specifically, the code to the safe, but they need to know how to get access to it at the time, or if those seed phrases are somewhere with that cold storage wallet, that they know what they're looking for to find it. So just make sure you do know where that is, or you have somebody who does know where that is. So when it comes to like risks with estate planning, I've mentioned a couple of those. Sometimes, the risks of the cryptocurrency and the estate planning side of things are the exact same reasons that people like cryptocurrency too, from the financial standpoint. The biggest one is there's less, currently anyway, less government oversight over it. There's less regulation on it. So that means that, you have less government kind of hands all over it for the time being. From the estate planning side of things, though, without that sort of government oversight, or without rules specifically around it, where it's a little unclear what types of authorities somebody might have to access those types of assets, that's a huge risk, because you don't know any of the planning will actually allow access to it. So that's where you do have to be, unfortunately, more practical with it and say, all right, I need somebody who knows the information of how to access this, not just have the legal authority, because again, that legal authority they may have, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give them that access. The access is also a huge risk, right? I mean, there is less access when it's offline, when it's not a digital asset, when there's not records of it out there other than offline in a cold storage wallet, right? So without easier access to things, without the information to get access to those types of assets, somebody might have a harder time acting quickly, right? If they don't know exactly where things are, if they don't know exactly how to get into those types of cold storage wallets, offline crypto. Even for online accounts, that's a similar concern, right? You want to make sure somebody has easy access to those, knows at least where to find the password if you've written it down somewhere for an online account, but they can at least request that from a company. Offline things, there's no company to give them that information, right? You are that information and you have it somewhere, and you need to let them have access to it. I'm not saying go ahead and hand out your cold storage wallet to everybody or to the person directly, or tell everyone that you know the phrases to get into it, but make sure that they know where to locate those things, the people you want to have access. Currently, one of the more legal side of things, a bigger risk, I think, is that there is less legal guidance on a lot of this at the moment. And so it's more subject to change at a quicker pace than maybe something like, a retirement account law change, which we did recently have, but it was also the first one in however many years, decades, right? So we're talking about something that is probably going to have more oversight at some point. And that's just the trend in which those sorts of things are going, and for like the guidance coming down from the IRS on certain things, right? But because there's less oversight and less legal guidance right now, we also have to be more prepared for change with it. And that just means that, planning for it now means that planning may need to change relatively quickly in comparison to other sorts of legal concerns. just because it's a newer thing. I mean, it could be 5 years from now that we see that. It could be 10 years from now that we see it. Honestly, your guess is as good as mine. Congress doesn't tend to act very quickly on anything, right? Especially when it comes to new technology. So that's just something to be aware of, though. That is a bigger risk of maybe the planning that you have adequately in place for that asset right now is not going to be adequate when it, 5 years from now. And, I think another big risk with this is honestly from the attorney side of things. Does the attorney you're working with follow those cryptocurrency changes? I mean, anybody who's doing estate planning obviously should stay up to date on law changes, things like that. But if you're working with somebody who maybe doesn't understand the crypto currency market, and I'm certainly no expert myself, but somebody who has no idea what it is, somebody who's maybe practiced for forever but has made no attempt to stay up to date on it, that's a risk too, right? Because they may not be able to give you proper guidance on something like that if they themselves don't know what it is or how to deal with it. I like I said, I'm certainly no expert on the cryptocurrency market myself, but I try to stay as up to date as I can on what the technology is, how it's handled, how it's held, because that's important to know. I can't effectively plan around it if I don't know what type of asset it is or like how it's held offline. I mean, believe me, I've learned a lot of new phrases over the last couple of years that I didn't know previously before, especially the pandemic when cryptocurrency started really kind of exploding as a market. So because of those changes, because of the lack of, background with a lot of potential planners, be prepared for changes or having to sort of stay up to date on these things and inform somebody that, hey, this is something that we need to incorporate into our plan. It's definitely something that should be asked nowadays as somebody goes in to meet with an estate planning attorney is, do you have any offline cryptocurrency assets? How would you like us to plan for that in terms of who's the person we're designating things to? Now, one really important thing with estate planning and sort of the offline access to things is it's really important probably not to actually, or really important not to put like the seed phrases down in your will, for example. So it'd be better to give somebody access to that or directions as to how to locate those phrases than it would be to write it up in a will for a couple of reasons. One, wills in particular are potentially public record after someone's passed away where, if somebody requests a copy of it and they're a beneficiary of the estate, they might see those phrases and that may give more access to those things than you want. Obviously, one of the, appeals of cryptocurrency is that more private nature of it. So you probably don't want to be putting those phrases in a written document that a lot of people are going to see. And that goes for a trust as well. Honestly, it would be better to, again, designate a sort of chosen successor holder of those phrases or, somebody with access to it and have them distribute the assets if that's what's necessary, than it would be to give everybody access to that information who might be involved in that planning. So I wouldn't write it down in those sorts of documents. I think it's okay to say that we do have it and I'm designating it to these people, but giving, separate instructions as to how to access it is probably going to be safer for you from a just access to information standpoint. But again, because that information is more private and maybe not written down directly for everybody to see, it's all the more important to make sure that somebody has access to it. Because again, if nobody knows where it is, it's basically like saying I have cash hidden somewhere and I don't know where that cash is and nobody else does. You're not going to be able to go to a bank and say, well, I promise I have this cash somewhere, right? So it's really important to make sure that those people know those things. So, you can certainly plan for it legally. You can give the proper authorities to somebody to access things through a power of attorney for financial power of attorney decisions. You can make sure that it's referenced and designated to somebody through an estate plan and say, maybe write something in the will that says, I'm leaving my cryptocurrency, located in, I don't know if this is even correct, but like cold storage wallet 1 that I've referenced somewhere, that goes to these certain individuals, maybe equally, or this specific person, right? Or you're directing it to be sold and then the assets divided up, right? It depends on what your wishes are, but you can designate it that way through the document itself. But what's really important is to make sure that you're not writing down the access information in that document just because especially with a will, it's much more likely to become potentially public knowledge. And obviously, if somebody has the access to your cryptocurrency, they have the ability to go in and take it, right? If they know where that wallet, cold storage wallet is, or if it's not offline, if it is digital and they know the access information there, it's a risk. So just be aware of that and be careful. I mean, cryptocurrency with estate planning, like I said, there's some risks with it just because of the positives of it are also risks from a different perspective, for, especially a group of attorneys that really likes to keep records of things and have access to information and all of that. That is a huge benefit to have that type of information. But from the cryptocurrency standpoint, that could be more of a risk for access to information. Not saying attorneys are going to steal it, but just more of a, we like to write things down, but when it comes to cryptocurrency, it's not something you necessarily want to just write down for everybody to see. So it's a risk from the estate planning side of things, but it's not a risk that's something you can't deal with. It's just, it has to be dealt with slightly differently. I'm not seeing any questions right now, but again, I just want to remind everybody that keep an eye out for our document finder tool that you'll receive via email after this. That can be a really good place, speaking of, to write down, hey, I have this type of cryptocurrency equipment, cold storage wallet, the seed keys, all of that. And here's where to find them if need be. That could be a good place to write that down. And also you'll be receiving a feedback form from us at the end of this as well, that gives you a place to reach out to us, or to let us know, reach out to you rather, to set up an initial consultation. Our initial consultations are complimentary, so we don't charge anybody to come in and talk to us. But we do schedule them for about 2 hours, give or take, just to really have enough time to sit down and talk through everything regarding the family, regarding what types of assets you have, for example, when it comes to like cryptocurrency and any other type of asset for that matter. And then by the end of that 2 hours, usually we can give you a pretty good recommendation on what we would design as a plan for you. But that's a really helpful thing for you to fill out if you would like us to reach out to you to set aside time to do that. So do keep an eye out for that. And then just as a quick reminder, next week is our a public seminar in Oshkosh. So if you want to sign up for that, you can do so at estateplanninglive.com. Seating, as always with kind of in-person events, can be limited. So if you're really looking to do that and you haven't, I would do it as soon as you can. And then I guess if any questions come up regarding the topics we've talked about today, you can always send it, send an email to our office at, I believe it's learnmore@hooperlawoffice.com or legalstaff@hooperlawoffice.com, and it can be forwarded to me. So with that, I will let you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to see people in person next week.